Hey everybody, and welcome back to I guess what we can call the second version of the Spider-Man review series. Much like with the Harry Potter re-reviews and the restarted Sonic series, I wanted to re-review some Spider-Man games due to the lack of quality on those earlier videos. Unlike with Potter, we're not going to be re-looking at all of them though. I'll tell you right now, I'm not replaying Web of Shadows or the Amazing Movie tie-ins. Mostly because I think I got what I wanted to say out of the Amazing Movie tie-in games, and Web of Shadows, you gotta play like 4 times to get all the endings and stuff, and I'm done. I'm not going back to that. I'm just going to remix the reviews to the original 3 Spider-Man movie-based games, and we'll be looking at some brand new Spider-Man games that I missed, and different versions of the ones that I did look at. So let's start off by looking at where the webhead got his first 3D start with the aptly titled Spider-Man. Released in 2000, Spider-Man was not only the first 3D Spider-Man game, but was also the first Spider-Man game to be published by Activision. Activision would go on to publish Spider-Man titles until 2014 after the Amazing Spider-Man 2 film. After that, the rights were picked up by Insomniac Games. Developing the first 3D title for Spidey was Neversoft. Neversoft had recently been gaining popularity due to their work on the first Tony Hawk Pro Skater game the year before. And as such, Spider-Man runs on the same engine used for Pro Skater, and in a cross connection, Spider-Man got to appear in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. Now, this is actually the first time I'm playing this game, or rather I should say, this is my first time playing through it completely. You see, right before the first Spider-Man movie hit theaters, Kellogg's ran this promotional thing that had a demo disc of a Spider-Man game in it with some of their products. However, if you're thinking that that demo was for the movie-based game, well, think again. In a strange twist, the demo was actually for this game, the PS1 game that was ported to the PC, and the only thing that actually tied it into the film was the costume for Spider-Man was changed to the one that was used in the film. I actually didn't think too much of this as a kid. I'd never played the PS1 game nor any Spider-Man game before this demo disc, so I was in heaven. The demo covered a pretty big chunk of the opening chapters before ending on a cliffhanger. It cut off right after a certain character was in danger and another character was being kidnapped, so I was interested in seeing what happened next. However, by the time I bought the Spider-Man movie game for the Xbox, I totally forgot that the demo was a thing because I was so amazed with the jump in quality, even though the movie-based game owes a ton to the design choices from this game. So this game's story begins with Peter at a science expo in which Dr. Otto Octavius, seemingly reformed by the way, is showing off some of his new technology. Before the demonstration can finish, Spider-Man apparently shows up and steals the tech, naturally confusing the hell out of Peter. Also in the crowd is disgraced Bugle journalist Eddie Brock, who tries to take pictures of the fake Spidey making off with the tech. The fake Spidey ends up busting Eddie's camera, causing the Venom symbiote to return and making Eddie want to take revenge on Spider-Man. Meanwhile, the real Spider-Man begins to track down who this mysterious doppelganger is and who he's working for. It helps if you're familiar with some of the villains from Spidey's Rogues Gallery, and there's not a ton of exposition on who they are, though it probably won't affect your enjoyment of the plot. It's a fairly simple comic book story where Spider-Man goes from location to location, coming across various Marvel heroes and villains. Spider-Man will get help from Black Cat, looking a tad bluer here, Daredevil, Johnny Storm, and even the Punisher. And he's going to need help as the journey to figuring out who framed him will have him crossing paths with the likes of Scorpion, Rhino, Venom, Mysterio, Doc Ock, and even Carnage. The plot, like I said, has a very comic book feel, and hey, even Stan Lee narrates the opening to some levels in that nostalgic Marvel Comics opening text. Seriously, the intro narration might sound corny as all hell, but if you've ever actually read one of the old school Amazing Spider-Man comics, you're totally going to understand why it reads like that. The plot intrigued me enough to want to see it through to the end. It might not be the deepest Spider-Man plot out there, but it kept me engaged, and it was interesting to see what villain was going to pop up next. The game is broken up into 6 main levels, which in turn are then broken up into 33 little areas, and there's also several difficulty settings for you to try out. The majority of the levels have you web swinging around trying to reach the end and beating up all the bad guys along the way. You get these small little city levels in addition to the sewers and a warehouse. Now in the outside levels you're only confined to the roofs, and there's actually a plot reason for that. Apparently Doc Ock released some sort of chemical gas flooding the city streets, which explains why there's green fog all over the place, which is definitely the gas and not the draw distance being covered up on the PlayStation. However, there's a ton of variety to each of the levels. It's not always just making a beeline for the end. There's some missions where you have to disarm bombs and save hostages, outrace a helicopter that's trying to kill you, or navigate through a maze in the sewers. Most of the levels are incredibly short, while there are a few that linger on. Because of the short nature to the levels, there's actually very few at checkpoints, so dying in most cases means you're going back to the start. Though, honestly, with levels being so short, this never becomes overtly annoying. Controlling Spidey is easy enough. You got your basic kicks and punches in addition to your web attacks. You also got web cartridge to pick up and health pickups. I've always been a little bit annoyed at them making webbing a limited resource, since the whole thing to make Spidey's fighting cool, would be the web attacks. It's okay here because there's a lot of web cartridges lying around, and honestly, if you don't overuse it, you can make it through most levels without running out. It's great to web zip to the ceiling and then web up enemies. Web swinging, on the other hand, takes some time to master, especially if you're coming off some of the Spider-Man titles that came out after this. When you go to web swing, Spidey will zip off in the direction you choose, but you can't change directions or really pivot your way into one of the other directions to aim the path. When you go to web swing, Spidey will zip off in the direction you choose, but you can't change directions or really move slightly in other directions to aim your path. Also, you constantly descend as you swing when you're holding onto the web. When you first start swinging, it can be a bit to work around, but by the second or third levels, you should have a pretty good handle on it. Considering this is the first 3D open area Spider-Man game, this swinging mechanic is solid. Sure, you can't do anything fancy, and it feels very fragile as you move around, but it works. Gets you from point A to B, and honestly, I've never really had an issue with it. Some of the levels can be a tad complicated though, thanks in part to the controls being a tad rigid and the camera not always being so friendly. Chasing Venom can be a real pain in the ass since you have to keep up with him well enough or the level ends. The issue here is that making a mistake, regardless of how small, will basically spell out a game over. If you get stuck behind something or the web swinging doesn't line up with the right path that Venom took, it's hard to make tweaks and get back on track. Another level that's frustrating is the sewer ones. The first level particularly, where you have to turn off the water to make progress, is slightly annoying because even if you fall in and touch the water ever so slightly, you're dead and it's back to the start. It's hard to get good camera angles here, and you might easily fall off the ledges if you're not careful. The second level here, where you have to chase Venom on the train, is also annoying because you can fall off the side of the train. This is more frustrating than it needs to be since you have to fight lizard minions on the train, and the attacking animations can often lead to your downfall. As you fight the lizards, you might get close to the edge, and if the last animation kicks the lizard off, or he moves and your last animation attack is still in progress, it might end with Spidey falling off the train. This level is actually pretty short, so the constant retries isn't horrible, but honestly, would it have been that bad just to put up a barrier around the sides of the train so you couldn't fall off? But by far, the worst of the worst, and the part that almost made me snap my freaking controller in two, was the fight against Mysterio. This fight illustrates the flaws in the controls more than anything else, and what's worse is that while in the other levels it's easy to often get back to where you died, or there's a checkpoint to usually give you a bit of a leeway so that you can get back to where you were, there's no checkpoints in this fight, which means you're going to be struggling fresh from the start each time you die. You get this strange sort of side view where Spidey can move around the circular arena with multiple levels, and you can jump to each level. However, the controls don't lock you onto the ring because it needs to allow you to jump between the different levels, and so Spidey still moves like he does in all the other stages. So you'll fall off when you mean to avoid an obstacle, or you'll miss hitting Mysterio because the angle's wrong, or you'll try to jump up on a ledge but you won't, or you'll try to jump down to a ledge but you won't. The final part, trying to dodge the electric floor, is pure torture since you can't even get a clear view of the floor and it blends in well to the other sections of the floor. And the kicker to all this is that the game throws health pickups around the arena to help you, but good luck getting to them. You're either going to be attacked before you can reach them, or the strange camera angle is going to prevent you from getting there in time. Seriously, take your pick on this one. This fight took me like an hour, and yeah, when I beat it I was thrilled and I felt like I really accomplished something, and I didn't have to resort to a cheat code or a level skip, but there was just too many cheap deaths here that I felt were beyond my control, so it just was more frustrating than sort of thrilling. The rest of the boss fights are actually pretty fun in comparison. They start off easy enough as you just dish out hits. The first battle against Scorpion is really easy as you can just pummel a guy outright. The fight against Rhino is the traditional, get him to charge into something type of fight that we've seen pretty much throughout the series. The fights against Venom ratchet up the difficulty, though once you realize he takes massive damage from your web shots, it becomes a cakewalk. Even the final bosses are a lot of fun if they kind of drag on a bit. The Doc Ock fight in particular, that one kind of just sort of lingers more than it should. It's not frustrating though, so I generally enjoyed it. Seriously, it's that damn Mysterio fight that honestly was the hardest thing just because of the lack of controls and the weird angle. After beating the game, there's a few reasons for sticking around. Pun intended. There's alternate costumes to unlock, and some of them have different stats allowing for more health or more attack power, and these suits are key to beating the game on the higher difficulties. The game's pretty easy on the normal setting, but if you do go to hard, enemies obviously take a lot more damage off of you, and your health's going to go down faster, and the boss fights will definitely be more of a challenge here. So these added suit bonuses help a lot if you're going to play through the game again. There's a what-if mode in which you get to play the game over again with tiny little changes. Plot still kind of plays out the same way, but you might see other characters and strange situations happen as you make your way through. For instance, in this mode you'll encounter Johnny Storm by the Fantastic Four building in the opening level. It's nothing special, but it makes the second playthrough a little less predictable. There's also side modes such as time attack, survival, speed training, and target practice. Here you just beat up enemies under a time limit or see how long you can hold out with time attack and survival. Speed training has you rushing to the end of a course, and target practice puts you in a target gallery arena where you gain points from hitting Spider-Man villains and avoiding the heroes. Presentation is your classic PS1 style. You got your polygon models for characters that barely look like humans, and your fog draw distance masking the levels loading itself as you progress, and it's great. I mean, considering this is the first 3D Spider-Man game, it looks great. With all the past side-scrolling Spider-Man games that came before this, I mean, it must have been one hell of a sight to see Spidey jump into 3D. And looking forward to the future games, without, heavily going into detail, this presentation design only gets better. The FMV cutscenes are pretty cool, even though there's only a few of them, and the voice acting is solid. The soundtrack is okay, it mostly sounds like Saturday morning cartoon battle music, which, fits the aesthetic, though honestly there was nothing too memorable on display here, though I always get stuck at the main menu on a loop, because that remixed Spider-Man theme song is kick-ass. Overall, I had a lot of fun playing through the first 3D Spider-Man game. It was nice to see where a lot of the design that helped define the movie-based game came from. Like I said before, I can only imagine what people playing this for the first time felt after so many side-scrolling games. It's not perfect, but it's fun, and honestly, that's all it needs to be. As the first 3D game in the series, it could have gone wrong in a lot of different ways. I like that the story keeps throwing new villains into the mix to keep the story fresh, and the different objectives in all the levels kept the game from getting stale. It's not your traditional beat-em-up superhero game where it's, okay, enter this level and beat up 60 bad guys, we're going to lock you from moving forward until you beat them all up, do it again, then we'll just change what they look like in the next level, and you'll do it the same way again. The different objectives really help in that, I think. Even with the more frustrating moments rearing their ugly heads, I'm looking at you, Mysterio Fight, I enjoyed my time with this game quite a bit. Now going forward, I could have looked at the sequel, Enter Electro, which I actually looked at in the last series of reviews, but it's very similar in structure to this game, and I'd rather move on to the movie-based games again. Also, I didn't actually own Enter Electro, I actually borrowed it from a friend, so yeah, don't have the game anymore, so can't really jump into it, and I'm really not looking to spend the amount of money that it costs to, buy a new copy. I know you can get it cheap if it's not in the case, but if I'm going to get it, I kind of want the case. So we're going to just skip over and go straight to the movie-based games, but we're going to be looking at the other versions aside from the main console versions. So there's stuff to look forward to in the future. So come back next time when we revisit the first Spider-Man movie-based game. Thanks for watching.